Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Barbara. This is Barbara Talks Some More. This is my second channel, so be sure to subscribe to this channel as well as my original channel called Barbara Talks K. Over there I talk about astrology, metaphysics, the metaphysical world. I like to go live over there. And then over here I started doing public figure natal chart readings, synastry readings for public figures as well, and then also whatever comes through to talk about. Okay, so today is August 13th when I am recording this. Okay, I'm gonna be doing a natal chart reading on Amy Winehouse. Interestingly enough, I did Lana Del Rey yesterday. I hooked into Amy from Lana's energy, so that's kind of how, that whole stream of consciousness went. Okay, so we're going to be looking at Amy Winehouse today. Interestingly enough, all these people, it was interesting. I actually started off with Drake, then I did Lana, now I'm doing Amy Winehouse, and they're all part of pretty much like the same age bracket or same age range, which is really interesting to me. Okay, and it's actually wild to think of, Amy Winehouse living actually still, had she not died at age 27, Club 27, had she not died so young, she'd still be very young today. So very interesting to see that, right? Especially when you compare her to her peers. She's a little bit older, okay, than the others. She is 1983, okay, but still within the same range, okay, age range. So Amy Winehouse, okay, her birthday is September 14th, 1983, 10:25 p.m. Born in London, England, in the United Kingdom, okay? So basically the way that I do these readings is I kind of just go over first impressions first, whatever jumps out at me when I first look at the charts. Also, I am hooking into the energy here. By the way, these are not messages from beyond. Okay, I'm not channeling the person. I'm just looking at the energy around the individual, okay? And just kind of whatever comes through. Sometimes I'm hooking into the energy first and then I find it in the natal chart, okay? So that's kind of how I do these readings. With that being said, okay, anything that comes through is of course alleged, okay, for educational purposes only. I'm not a psychologist. That's also one of my disclaimers as well. Always do your own research, you guys, okay? Because again, this is my interpretation of the energy of what I am hooking into here. Also, with that being said, maybe you guys have similar energies in your charts, right? Maybe it'll play out that way, maybe it won't, right? Depends on the whole chart. Sometimes there's something else overpowering the chart as well, okay? So, it'll take over, maybe it'll neutralize the energy. Of course, there's also transits taking place too, which also are affecting individuals as well, right? So again, take it with a grain of salt. Again, maybe it'll resonate. Let's say you have that energy in your chart, maybe it won't, because of course, there's so much to look at, right? There's a sign, there's a house, right? And then there's the aspects, and then also again the rest of the chart, the transits, all these things. So that's pretty much that. Also, if you guys would like your own natal chart reading, synastry reading, progressed natal chart reading, mini natal chart reading, mini synastry reading, the information for all of that is in the description box below. My readings are pretty much in the same format as I do them here. It's a video, but it's pretty much an audio because it's me talking the entire time. The mini reading, so mini synastry, mini natal chart, are closer to these ones that I do over here, okay? The full-blown in-depth readings, I go on for a while about absolutely everything in the natal chart, okay? With that being said, with those minis, you guys can also, if there's something you guys want to know about and you have a specific question, I can look at that, or again, I can do it kind of how I do these readings in terms of first impressions first. So here I have Amy Winehouse. I'm looking at her photo, right? And, a few things just like based off of her images here, okay, that populated. Very interesting, like in terms of her energy, even her style of music to me gives very much the vibe of someone from a past life, right? Like it's very like almost olden day type of music, right? It's even almost like soul, even like her type of voice, right? Like I just feel like she is reincarnating again into this lifetime, right? To complete that desire line, okay? That's the first thing that I noticed. The second thing, interestingly, that I noticed is she very much gives me like Egyptian energy, like ancient Egyptian energy, not modern day Egypt, okay? So ancient Egyptian energy. It's really the eyeliner that stood out to me, okay? It's very bold. It kind of reminds me of Cleopatra, and even some of those figures, right? Like statues, sometimes maybe you guys have seen them, let's say floating around the internet as well, of like ancient Egypt figures and characters, right? So I don't really think that she is coming from ancient Egypt. I just feel like she has maybe a connection to ancient Egypt, or maybe like a deity that she was working with or something of that sort was connected to ancient Egypt, okay? That's kind of what I am picking up on more so here. I do feel like this energy is like merged with her energy field as well, okay? So that's the distinction here. I don't think it's like she had a past life in ancient Egypt, although of course she could have. I actually feel like it's more so some sort of being or a deity from ancient Egypt, from that time frame that she actually merged with in terms of her energy field, okay? So that's what I hooked into as well. The other thing that I found really interesting is, of course, she is part of Club 27, right? I'm sure you guys have heard all of the theories, that float around about Club 27. A few interesting things here, okay? So in terms of Club 27, again, different people may have different theories. So again, do your own, research. But again, sometimes people say when people sell out, they're going to end up in Club 27, right? This used to be like a thing with a lot of of these older celebrities more so find that when people start catching on to these trends, they kind of like pull back the energy a little bit because, you know, again, they're always trying to like mess with people, right? They're always trying to be like, actually, no, that's not that, right? Because see, it's not happening anymore. That's just like, again, my own opinion. The other interesting thing about, you know, Club 27 is this is when the prefrontal cortex develops. And I've actually heard that by the time people hit 30, the MK Ultra, right? So the mind control programming actually wears off. But it's this too, in terms of the whole collective is under mind control, right? In one way, shape, or form. And when that prefrontal cortex develops, you literally almost get this other veil lifted off of your eyes, right? So whether, you know, she was in that program or not, doesn't matter, because I feel like the whole collective undergoes some form of mind control programming, especially like with TVs and shows and so on and so forth. Now, what's interesting in her energy, okay, this is the other thing that I wanted to connect it to. Club 27 is also connected to that Saturn return. Now, the other thing that's interesting here, okay, well, all of this is connected to is literally around age 27, right? That's when your Saturn return will be slowly starting, right? So when she crossed out, Saturn was still in Libra, right? So she was about to enter her first Saturn return. Now, what I feel so more so psychically and intuitively here for her is, in her case, actually what I think would have happened was she would have turned her life around or attempted to turn her life around after her Saturn return or as her Saturn return had started, right? So that's a struggle with a lot of these, you know, big figures, especially when they become super big, right? Because it's like sometimes people want them to be remembered people, as in people who manage them and so on and so forth, of course, allegedly, right? They want them to be remembered as like this image, right? Like, again, you know, especially with her, she has like a very specific image. I'm looking at her pictures here, right? You know, sometimes she looks different, but you know, there's an image going on here with her. And it's just like sometimes they want them to just be remembered like this, right? So part of it is like, you know, keeping the person frozen in time, right? Like remembered in that way. But also, you know, if she were to grow and evolve and slowly start coming out of this, I do feel like she was actually going to eventually come out of this addiction. Okay, it does say that she crossed out from alcohol poisoning. I'm curious to know if she also had substances or just like issues with substances. We'll get into that shortly. But I do feel like she would have started turning her life around. And, you know, as she would have quote unquote sobered up, she would have probably maybe even stepped away from this, right? Or at least from the limelight, or again, as some people, you know, would eventually start exposing, right? So that's the biggest thing here, why some of these people end up crossing out. And it doesn't always have to mean that it's deliberate, but a lot of things are frequency control and they're happening from the astral plane. So it's like basically what tends to take place is the person opens up their energy field. In her case, it was through alcohol, right? And that's kind of how the frequency control takes place, right? It's basically the entities on the astral that kind of push the person in that direction, right? So it's almost like out of body, like energy that basically impacts the person's crossing out. I guess I can say it that way. And again, these are just my own observations, okay? So here they're saying she, you know, died from an accidental alcohol poisoning. In the brackets, it says misadventure. Personally, like when I hook into her energy, I do feel like there were substances involved as well. Okay, so I Googled it. Yes, it says that she struggled with drug and alcohol addiction in her life and that she used to do hard drugs. Okay, very, very interesting here. But again, you know, they're still ruling the death as, you know, alcohol poisoning. It's saying here that it was not caused by illegal drugs. I feel like drugs probably were still connected to it. It's kind of what I more so like feel internally, okay, as I hook into the energy here. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into her natal chart here. I have her here as a sun in Virgo, 5th house, moon is in Capricorn, 7th house, Mercury is in Virgo, 5th house retrograde. Interesting, okay? Venus in Leo 4 house retrograde, Mars also in Leo 4 house. These two are conjunct. She is a Gemini rising. Very, very interesting here. Her north node is in Gemini and it's in the first house. The other thing that I'm noticing here is her Chiron is in Gemini. A lot of these people that I've been looking at their charts these past few days, they've had the Chiron in Gemini, which is the other thing that stood out to me when I first pulled up the chart here, because it's like, again, this is a wound around the throat chakra, right? Which is interesting, right? Because I've seen how a lot of these individuals so far have kind of gone into the direction of either healing or opening up the throat chakra through music in this case, okay? The fact that she's musically talented, okay, is pretty much the moon conjunct Neptune, okay? Literally, it was so wild. As soon as I pulled up the chart, I'm like, okay, she's got to have moon Neptune going on. I was like, okay, she's got moon in Capricorn, 0 degrees. I was like, okay, what's going on with Neptune? And Neptune is in Sag, 26 degrees at a sign conjunction here. By the way, if you guys are new here, I look up to 10 degrees of an orb. Some people are super strict with the orbs. They look at way tighter orbs and that's all they count. Honestly, if I'm feeling it, I open it up to 15 degrees. Okay, again, it's because I'm feeling the energy first and I'm looking for it in the charts. Moon conjunct Neptune, there it is. That's her addiction. This is basically the addiction energy here, okay? Anytime anyone has anything honestly going on with moon Neptune, even if it's a trine, even if it's a sextile, trying to stay away from substances as much as you can, because again, this is that energy that is very empathetic, okay, very intuitive, also super creative, and of course Neptune always deals with music and things that are outside of this realm, okay? So, you know, that's the thing with this energy. It's like these people, again, because they're highly empathetic, they could probably absorb a lot of energy. And there's just this clip that just keeps replaying in my mind that I saw of Amy Winehouse where, again, she had finished the concert. You can kind of tell that she was definitely on some sort of substances. And the person who was like interviewing her basically said something. Again, I'm paraphrasing here, right? So maybe this wasn't word for word. It's like more so the vibe of the clip, okay, that I'm remembering now. Because this was like a while back that I watched this. It wasn't like today, right? But anyway, so basically like the interviewer, right, was kind of asking her about her performance, and Amy just said like some very negative words, right? Okay, so she was very hard on herself, it sounds like, okay, even though, right, her music was very unique, okay, it was very, very unique is really what it is. Now, the other thing, sometimes that I think about too when, I see people who cross out young is, the way that I see it sometimes is like, okay, maybe this person like, really completed their life purpose very quickly, right? And, they ended up crossing out for that reason. I don't feel that in her case, okay? I do feel like, there's still a lot going on here karmically, energetically. There was a lot that she was about to unbind herself from, okay? I do feel like as I hook into the energy here that it's actually connected to the father, okay? I am curious, trigger warning, by the way, guys, trigger warning here. I am curious to know, because this was one of the first things that I hooked into, if there was anything going on with sexual abuse here, okay, or anything of that sort connected directly to the father. Maybe it wasn't the father, maybe it was, somehow the father was connected to it, or like she felt like she wasn't protected by the father, okay? But I feel like that's the energy she was always trying to unbind herself from. So interesting. Okay, I had to Google it just because I was picking up on the energy here. It says that, there's no evidence or anything of that sort that she did experience sexual abuse, which is really interesting, but it does say that she did experience family instability and that the father, or her father rather, had a lot of extramarital affairs that basically affected the childhood. So it's interesting. I was picking up on that energy of the father somehow being responsible for this. I do still pick up on this energy. Maybe it's not something that's overt or like spoken about or talked about, but again, maybe he wasn't in the house. Maybe, the mother had boyfriends, for example, or maybe she kind of, went off and started living on her own, right? Because here it does say that she was separated from her family at 9 years old. Who knows what kind of people and characters she encountered, but there is an energy here as I hook into her energy. It's not really a blame. It's just more so just there energetically where she feels like the father is responsible for this, which is so wild. Now, when I Googled it, it said that he had all of those extramarital affairs, which basically affected the family. Really interesting. She's got Cancer occupying her second and her third house. Okay. She does have an interception, by the way. I look at these readings in the Placidus tropical system. Okay. So, Cancer occupying the second and the third house. This is interesting to me because, again, she got double of this energy taking place here. Okay. So Cancer in the second and the third house, the 8th and the 9th house are in Capricorn. Okay. So it's interesting because she literally is making money through this family wound. Now, the other thing that I was looking for her Chiron to see if the Chiron was aspecting the moon at all. Basically, the Chiron here is in conjunct the moon, okay? And this is pretty close here, okay? So moon in Capricorn, 0 degrees. Chiron is in Gemini at 2 degrees, okay? So there literally is this wound connected to the home, right? This is a quincunx also, okay? So the in conjunction is also known as a quincunx. This is like a friction energy. These are two energies that, just don't get along, or you can even look at it as these two energies have nothing in common, right? I have a video on that, by the way, on my original channel, okay, called Barbara Talks on quincunxes and all the energies that don't get along, because every sign has two signs, okay, that basically it doesn't get along with, right? You can look at it that way, has friction with, right? Has nothing in common with, okay? So her moon is in conjunct Chiron. So there is that home wound, mother wound connected to the home and the upbringing, essentially, is kind of what is going on here, which, I mean, already as per my Google search, okay, she was kind of separated from the home at age 9. So who knows? Honestly, again, I have never watched any movie connected to her or any documentary. I'm seeing here that there's, documentaries and movies and so on and so forth. I am curious now. I do want to learn more about her life, right? So maybe some of you guys are hardcore fans. Maybe some of you guys are going to know more information. I'm pretty much going based off of intuition, right? And then also quick Google searches here, right? And again, things that I know of her peripherally, right? Because again, there's some information that you just kind of learn over time when these people are in the public eye. So it's the Chiron in the 12th house and it's retrograde that's standing out to me, okay? Because it's like she's coming back with this wound. It's in Gemini and it's in the 12th house. This is interesting to me because like the Chiron being in the 12th house is also a past life wound, and then it's a retrograde, so it's coming through twice here, okay? Retrograde energy to me always feels like a frustration. It always feels like the person, has tried to do it so many times, might be frustrated. And it's really interesting because Mercury is retrograde as well. Mercury in Virgo, very smart, very intelligent, and again, Sun in the 5th, Mercury in the 5th, again, someone who wants to be seen, somebody who wants to be on that stage, absolutely, that's there. But because the Mercury is retrograde, this then changes the person's, way of thinking. This then brings through, a spiritual message, right? It's like a more spiritually inclined way of thinking, right? Because when we have Mercury retrograde in terms of the transits, everything is kind of going into like either chaos loss, right? People's exes are coming back for some people. Obviously, it depends where Mercury's transiting, right? You know, technology, tech issues, don't sign contracts, all these types of things, right? So in her chart, she already has this, right? So again, you know, Mercury retrograde, again, the planet looks like it's going, you know, backwards. That's basically what Mercury retrograde is all about. But I feel like because the Mercury is retrograde, she's a Gemini rising and her North Node is in Gemini in the first house. North Node, South Node are pretty much retrograde for everybody with the exception of a few people. Pretty much every chart that I've seen, you know, they've been retrograde. Okay, so this Mercury retrograde is now this huge player, right? The throat chakra, speaking, communicating, and so on and so forth. I am curious to know, I mean, she was very young. I'm curious to know if, you know, there was a book involved. So I had to Google it, right? It says, no, she did not write an autobiography or a traditional book during her lifetime. So I am thinking that probably had she, you know, continued past her Saturn return, she probably would have, you know, spoken up or, you know, written a book about her life. It keeps bringing me back to the father. I'm curious to know who the father was now. Let's see if he is still alive. More so psychically, what I'm getting here is I'm curious to know, was he like a political figure? Was he something of the sort? Like, he just gives me the vibe that he is either like, he might not be publicly well known, for example, like to the level that she was, but he could be involved in some sort of like background, like career where like there's the energy here of him even fearing being exposed. So let's look at that now. Okay, very, very interesting. Okay, so I just Googled a little bit more information about the father. Here it says that he himself, okay, was an amateur jazz artist. Okay, so there's a little bit of that jealousy energy probably coming through that she actually achieved it, right? And he didn't. And it also says that he was a cab driver as well. Oh, very interesting. And, you know, there's some controversies here where also, I'm just reading this off Google now, where he basically felt like, you know, he was misrepresented basically in the relationship he had with his daughter. I'm curious to know now what, you know, was in this documentary. Maybe some of you guys have watched it. And, you know, again, maybe at some point in the future, I will watch it as well. But it's interesting. I keep picking up on the father. There's something going on here with literally the father figure. And it's interesting. She is a sun in Virgo. So again, very critical father, similar to Michael Jackson as well, who also had a sun in Virgo, right? So a lot of the time the sun's going to tell you about the father, you know, his personality, what is he like, right? So it's interesting, even sun conjunct Mercury. I know a lot of people have sun conjunct Mercury, okay, in their natal charts, okay, because these two don't travel too far away from each other. But kind of what I'm picking up on here more so for her and the father and his personality, that's kind of where his like maybe desire for him speaking and opening up the throat chakra and, you know, maybe being involved in music as well is coming from. Sun square Neptune is taking place here. So again, you know, this is a father who is evasive, elusive, absent, right? I mean, we already know that based off of these Google searches here, okay, that I just did. So it's literally showing up in the chart. Sun square Neptune can sometimes even be a father who is into substances himself, sometimes alcoholism too, right? Sun square moon, when I see sun square moon, usually the two parents don't get along, okay? So it doesn't always have to mean that they will divorce. They could have lived together, but it's like two different approaches to parenting the child, right? And square, to me, out of all of these, you know, aspects is one of the more intense ones, right? Because literally like nothing in common. Even when there's an opposition, they can still find some sort of middle ground. And even with the opposition, you will still be able to find some sort of balance is really what it is, right? Because, you know, the signs always pull from each other, right? In this case, it's a square. This is a lot of friction, okay, here that's taking place. Her moon is in Capricorn. Again, you know, this could be a cold upbringing. I mean, you know, it basically said that in the description, right? She literally was separated from her home, right? And it's literally at 0 degrees. Moon in Capricorn is also sometimes emotional neglect. Sometimes it could be a disciplinarian household or being raised by older people. I'm curious to know like what happened, you know, when she got separated from the family at 9. Okay, I'm not going to get into like Googling everything now, okay, in this reading here, right? But, you know, where did she go, right? Because, you know, intuitively more so I pick up on her maybe going either through foster homes or maybe going to maybe other family members, right? Like these types of situations, kind of even almost being like a runaway child. And of course, when the kid is on the run, right, you know, they encounter a lot of interesting people is really what it is, okay? So even when I look at this, right, and, you know, some of this information that, you know, I Googled and when I hook it to her energy, I do feel like throughout her life, she's really been taken advantage of, okay, by these figures around her, okay, is kind of what I am getting here. Now, it's interesting. Ascendant, okay, rising, yes, it can be how you look, but it can also be the direction that you are heading in this lifetime. So it's interesting because her rising and her North Node, right, because the North Node is going to be the life purpose, are pretty much conjunct here, okay? Super close. The North Node is in Gemini, it's in the first house, right? So literally someone here to open up the throat chakra, use the throat chakra, written or spoken word. So in her case, right, you know, this is again the singing, you know, speaking, right, opening up the throat chakra. I do feel like, again, if she had continued living, there would have been more information that came out, and I just keep being connected back to the father. You know what I mean? Like there's something here that she either would have exposed about him. Who knows? Maybe he had ties to certain people. I keep picking up on this, okay, even though it doesn't say it in Google. I did pick up on like that political energy. I'm curious to know like who he had had ties with, right? Or maybe he had sold out or something of that sort and then promised his kid. Something is going on here, okay? Something is definitely going on here because I am picking up on like political energy connected to the father. Of course, allegedly, I gotta say that too. So that's kind of what I'm getting here, you know, in terms of the first glance here, in terms of my first impressions when I look at Amy Winehouse's natal chart. And it's really interesting to me because that North Node in the first house just keeps standing out to me in terms of like this was a lifetime of herself realizing herself. It's just like psychically I keep seeing her like bound or just like, you know, and like this web, this karmic web with all these people that again, had she made it to her Saturn return and then overcome that, right? Which by the way is a huge accomplishment for anyone. Because again, the prefrontal cortex develops and that's when people usually start unbinding themselves from the things that usually got projected onto them when they were younger, okay? So I do feel like if she had made it past her first Saturn return, right, continue growing and evolving, again, she probably would have stepped away from the substances, right? And the other thing too, why I do speculate, again, I have to say speculate, these are just my own, again, speculations, trigger warning, okay? I do feel like she may have gone through some form of sexual abuse here, okay? Is because a lot of the time I notice when people struggle with like that intense of substances or like substance abuse, okay, or anything of that sort, usually does tend to stem from something going on with the sacral chakra, which is my own theory, right? This connection that I've made, but I've just noticed that, you know, it tends to be from some sort of either covert or overt sexual abuse, okay, because that's going on with the sacral chakra. If it's not like something that's overt, right, it could have just been someone made her feel uncomfortable, for example, when she was a kid, you know what I mean? Like, you know, there's different like varying degrees of it, okay, or it could even be someone who wasn't able to fully express their emotions, right? There is that aspect of it all as well, okay? And, you know, I am seeing here one of my indications of a potential of this, of course, it can be the moon to Pluto aspect. Sometimes, again, this is not for everybody, right? And it can also be Mars and Neptune. And again, it's a trine, so it's a little bit more harmonious. So it doesn't exactly have to mean this, right? But it could be an indicator just from my own observations, okay? Up until this point in time. That's kind of what I'm getting here. You know, she was kind of meant to make it past her first Saturn return. They harnessed her energy. She was slowly starting to unbind herself probably from all of these situations. She did fulfill basically like that past life desire line. I do feel like that's there, but sometimes people incarnate with like multiple things that they either have the desire line they want to clear. You can look at it as like the person and just like, you know, within the individual, there's like all these like connections to past lives, right? So like desire lines and so on and so forth. That's why sometimes, you know, people go through short phases and it's like they're done, they're over it because it could have been a past life desire. They weren't able to do it in a previous lifetime. Sometimes people incarnate with a lot of that to do, right? But in her case, I do feel like her most recent past life, okay, is directly connected to this first part of her life, right? And I do feel like after she would have cleared that on that soul level, you know, felt satisfied, I guess, to a certain extent that it's done, that it's out of her system, I think she would have turned her life around and probably gone more so in a direction of just like, you know, either like writing, like, because again, it's Gemini and it's in the first house speaking. I think it would have been speaking her truth, right? And I do feel like it would have been more so connected to her life. I do feel like it would have been more so like, again, even like obvious, like overt is really what it is. Because, you know, she could have written about it in her songs, but that's like sometimes, you know, a covert way of expressing something. You're still getting it out, but I do feel like she was meant to come into this energy of being fully empowered, okay, and fully expressing her truth, okay, which is interesting because I feel like the people around her, I'm just seeing this psychically now, I feel like they were like not directly feeding her the drugs because everyone still is their own person, right? And like, you know, they have the free will to do what they want, but they were like basically feeding into the addiction, right? To keep her under like their, I guess, management or like under their, you know, control is really what it is. So again, I do feel like she would have eventually unbound herself from this, or at least wanted to on that soul level. Okay, it's kind of what I'm getting here. So that's pretty much what I'm picking up on for Amy Winehouse. I hope you guys enjoyed this reading. If you did, please do like, share, and subscribe. If you guys would like your own reading, you guys can always send me an email. And I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day.